It was only really after the third murder that everybody did realise is a serial killer that's on the loose.
It always starts the same way: a quiet street, a final glance, a person who never makes it home, and somewhere in the dark, a figure watches, then disappears. Across continents and across centuries, killers have slipped through the cracks of police work, memory, and time itself. They struck without warning. They blended into daily life. They wore the faces of neighbors, strangers, or ghosts. They left behind bodies, questions, and silence. Tonight, we follow the trail of the most terrifying predators who were never caught. The ones who shaped entire eras of fear. The ones who challenged entire nations. The ones who vanished without a name, leaving only shadows behind. This is the most evil serial killers who were never caught. We begin in the suburbs of Michigan, where winter hit a nightmare. February 15th, 1976. It begins with the cold. Michigan in winter is a place where silence has weight, where snow buries sound, where a single set of footprints can tell a story. In 1976, that story belonged to a predator, someone who moved through neighborhoods that felt safe, watched children as they walked alone, and took them with a patience that felt almost practiced. The first sign came on February 15. 12-year-old Mark Stebbins left the American Legion Hall in Ferndale, a short walk home, a familiar route. But he never arrived. For 4 days, nothing. No witnesses, no clues, just absence. When his body was discovered behind a local office building, a chilling detail emerged. He had been washed, clothed, cared for, his nails trimmed, his hair neat, as if the killer believed he was preparing Mark for something, or presenting him. The community barely had time to breathe before the next horror came. That December, 12-year-old Jill Robinson left home after an argument and pedaled toward a hobby shop. Again, the pattern repeated. Gone. Missing. 4 days later, Jill was found near Interstate 75. Her body showed no signs of prolonged captivity like Mark, but she had been shot once in the head. A colder, more decisive killing. Yet she too had been cleaned, redressed, as if the ritual remained even when the method changed. Police were now certain they had a serial predator operating in Oakland County. The media began calling him the Babysitter Killer, because he treated his victims as if he were tending to them, caring for them, preparing them like a twisted guardian. Parents started escorting their kids everywhere. Schools issued warnings. The fear was no longer a whisper. It was a scream. January 2nd, 1977. 10-year-old Christine Mihelich walked to a corner store to buy a magazine. She was last seen in broad daylight. Her disappearance froze Oakland County. For 19 days, police searched. When a mail carrier found her body lying in a snowbank, the same signature appeared. Clean, dressed, eyes open. A child placed in the open like a message. The task force ballooned to more than 300 officers. Tips flooded in, more than 18,000 of them. Psychological profilers described a meticulous, organized offender, someone emotionally fixated on children, someone capable of controlling victims for days at a time, someone who lived in the community he hunted. March 16 brought the final confirmed victim. 11-year-old Timothy King borrowed his skateboard and rode to a drugstore. Witnesses saw him speaking politely, smiling. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming. He disappeared on his walk home. Oakland County mobilized instantly. Volunteers searched fields and ditches. Parents left porch lights on. A televised plea begged the kidnapper to feed Tim his favorite meal, fried chicken. 6 days later, Tim's body was found in a shallow ditch. He had been fed fried chicken shortly before death. The killer had listened. He had watched the news. He had responded. That detail broke families in half. It proved the predator was not only out there, he was paying attention. Then the killing stopped. The sudden silence stunned investigators. They were left with 4 murdered children, a community in ruins, and almost nothing that pointed definitively to a suspect. Evidence was thin. Fibers and hairs suggested multiple possible sources. A blue gremlin car seen by witnesses became a mythic clue. Composite sketches contradicted each other, and every promising lead collapsed under scrutiny. Over the decades, a few names surfaced. Archibald Sloan, whose car contained hairs that matched victims, but not all. Christopher Bush, the troubled son of a wealthy family, who committed suicide at the height of the investigation, though evidence against him never solidified. A supposed pedophile ring, a drifter, a local, a family acquaintance. Each theory seemed convincing on the surface. None survived examination. Thousands of hours, millions of dollars, families shattered forever. And still, the Babysitter Killer remained untouchable. The terror of the Oakland County child killer case is not only the brutality, it is the precision. These were children, taken from safe places, held for days, cleaned and groomed as if they mattered to the killer in a distorted, ritualistic way, and then placed where they would quickly be found, as if the killer wanted his work recognized. Most killers escalate. This one stopped at exactly 4, a perfect cold trail. Some believe he died. Others believe he was imprisoned for another crime. Many believe he simply moved, taking his rituals elsewhere, hiding behind a new name in a new state. The truth is buried under the snow of time, but the fear never left Oakland County. It lingers in every parent's memory, a shadow that never earned a face. The Babysitter Killer hunted in well-lit suburbs, where children vanished in minutes. Our next mystery unfolds in a place very different, an endless stretch of wilderness where disappearances are swallowed by the land itself. We follow the trail, 8 north, into Canada's most haunted highway, 1969. That is the year the first officially recognized victim was taken along what would one day be known as the most tragic stretch of road in Canada, a 400-mile corridor cutting through British Columbia's remote wilderness. Highway 16, soon branded by the public with a name that still echoes across the nation, the Highway of Tears. It begins with Gloria Moody, 19 years old, Indigenous, a young mother. Last seen leaving a bar in Williams Lake in October 1969. She walked out into the night with family members, stepped ahead of them toward the road, and never made it home. 2 days later, her body was found on a remote cattle trail. She had been assaulted and murdered. No suspect was ever named. At the time, no one imagined this was the start of something far larger. The pattern spread slowly across the early 1970s. A missing woman here, a body discovered there, cases separated by miles, by seasons, by communities. Police did not yet connect them. Many families reported their daughters missing, only to be told they had run away, despite having no history of doing so. It would take decades for the truth to settle in. This was not one killer. This was a hunting ground. Highway 16 crosses some of Canada's most isolated terrain. Dense evergreen forests, steep ravines, long distances between small towns. Limited jobs, limited transportation. For many Indigenous women, especially teenagers, hitchhiking was not risky. It was simply necessary. School, work, medical care, groceries, and family visits often required miles of travel. With no buses and no money for taxis, the roadside became part of daily life. Predators understood this, and they used it. By the late 1980s and 1990s, more disappearances followed. Some victims were found in shallow graves. Some were discovered in fields or wooded areas. Others vanished entirely without a trace. The RCMP eventually identified at least 18 official cases, but Indigenous organizations argue the real number is far higher, possibly exceeding 70. Names like Monica Jack, Alberta Williams, Delphine Nicole, and Lana Derrick became tragic symbols of a crisis few in the broader Canadian public were willing to confront. Families held vigils. Mothers searched the roads themselves. Communities begged law enforcement to take the cases seriously. The turning point came in the early 2000s. By then, the public pressure had mounted. Families demanded answers. Journalists investigated. Activists marched in every major city. In 2006, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police formed Project EPANA, a specialized task force dedicated to analyzing patterns along the highway and identifying whether a serial predator or predators were operating. Investigators built criteria. Victims must be female, Indigenous, or non-Indigenous. Must have been traveling along Highway 16 or nearby connecting roads, and must have been last seen hitchhiking, walking, or otherwise vulnerable. Under these conditions, EPANA officially linked 9 murders, expanding to 18 by 2007. That number represented only a fraction of the total tragedies, but it gave structure to chaos. Then, in 2012, a breakthrough. DNA evidence identified one killer in at least one EPANA case. Bobby Jack Fowler, an American serial predator, was confirmed through genetic testing to be responsible for the 1974 murder of 12-year-old Colleen McMillan. Fowler, known for abducting female hitchhikers, had been in British Columbia during the time, but the grim victory came with a bitter edge. He had died in prison in 2006. One case solved, many dozens still open. What EPANA discovered, however, changed the narrative forever. There was no single Highway of Tears killer. Instead, multiple predators, some local, some transient, some passing through, had taken advantage of the isolation, the vulnerability, and the systemic neglect surrounding indigenous communities. Even more painful was the realization that some murders showed signs of staging or transportation. In the 1994 murder of Ramona Wilson, investigators discovered zip ties near the burial site. Someone had restrained her. Someone likely drove her there, choosing a hidden place near the Smithers Airport. Someone who knew the land well enough to disappear. Other cases bore different signatures entirely. Some victims were stabbed, some strangled, some assaulted. Some remained missing without any physical evidence. The variations proved what families had long believed. These were different men with different motives, all shielded by the same landscape and the same indifference. Families continued to advocate. The public awareness grew. In 2016, the Canadian government launched a national inquiry into missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, acknowledging that racism, poverty, and chronic negligence all contributed to the crisis and to the killer's freedom. Shuttle services were introduced along Highway 16. Awareness campaigns educated travelers. Indigenous patrol groups organized regular sweeps. Safety improved, but the wounds remain. For many families, there is no closure. There are no convictions. Some graves remain unmarked because no remains were ever found. Some daughters have been missing for 40 or 50 years, their cases collecting dust, while the killers, plural, likely lived out their lives unnoticed. The Highway of Tears is a tragedy carved into the land itself, a stretch of road where danger traveled easily and justice moved too slowly. It is not a story about one monster. It is a story about a place that allowed many monsters to thrive. From the wilderness of British Columbia, where killers hid behind the vastness of the land itself, we move to a city alive with nightlife and noise. 1968. Glasgow, Scotland. Inside the smoke-filled Barrowland ballroom, music played, drinks flowed, and strangers danced shoulder to shoulder. And among them moved a man quoting scripture. A man who walked women home and murdered them before dawn. 1968. Glasgow, Scotland. A city carved from brick, smoke, rain, and nightlife. And at the heart of its late 60s pulse stood a place nearly every young adult knew. The Barrowland Ballroom. A dance hall of neon lights, live bands, warm laughter, and cold pints. Couples met here. Fights started here. Stories began here. And in the span of just over a year, 3 women left this ballroom and never made it home. Their murders birthed one of Britain's most chilling unsolved cases. A killer who vanished into the crowd, quoting scripture as he charmed women. A man known only by a name whispered through decades. Bible John. The nightmare began in February 1968. 25-year-old Patricia Docker said goodnight to her parents and headed to the majestic ballroom, just a short walk from her home. She never came back. The next morning, her body was discovered in a lane near Carmichael Street. She had been strangled, beaten, and sexually assaulted. Her handbag and clothing were missing. Police learned Patricia had not gone to the Majestic at all. She went to the Barrowland instead, a venue known for its popular Thursday over 25 nights. But with no witnesses and no clear timeline, Patricia's murder went cold almost immediately. No one realized yet that a pattern had begun. It resurfaced a year later, August 1969. 31-year-old Jemima McDonald attended another Thursday night dance at the Barrowland. She was last seen dancing with an unknown man. Her sister became concerned when Jemima didn't return home. 3 days later, children playing in an abandoned tenement found her body. She too had been beaten and strangled. Again, the killer left her partially naked, her handbag missing, and her body posed as if the violence had been deliberate, almost ritualistic. 2 women, both last seen at the same ballroom, both attacked violently, both found murdered. But it was the 3rd killing that defined the case. October 31, 1969, Halloween night. 29-year-old Helen Puttick went dancing at the Barrowland with her sister, Jean. Late in the night, they met 2 men, both named John. One introduced himself as a soldier. The other, according to Jean, quoted passages from the Bible. He lectured them about morality, condemned married women who attended dance halls, and disapproved of alcohol, despite drinking himself. Jean recalled he spoke with a soft, polite voice, well-dressed, clean, dark hair, blue or gray eyes, a narrow face, a distinctive gap in his upper teeth. Jean and Helen shared a taxi with the man they would come to know as Bible John. The soldier went his own way. During the taxi ride, Bible John continued to quote scripture, criticizing loose behavior. He mentioned having a cousin named Moria, whom he disliked for her drinking. When they reached Helen's stop, he exited the cab with her. John watched them walk into the darkness. Helen's body was found hours later behind her tenement building, beaten, strangled with her own stockings, raped, her handbag missing like the other victims, her clothes arranged, a leaf from a nearby garden placed on her body. And for the first time, police had a witness who had spoken to the killer. Jean worked with artists to create a composite sketch. It became one of the most recognized images in Scottish crime history. Police launched one of the largest manhunts the country had ever seen. More than 5,000 men were interviewed. Dentists were asked to identify anyone with a gap in their front teeth. Army barracks were searched, clubs questioned, taxi drivers interrogated. But Bible John had vanished. For decades, speculation swirled. Some detectives believed Bible John was a local man, familiar with the Barrowland, and comfortable enough to blend into its crowd. Others theorized he might have been a traveling worker, slipping in and out of Glasgow unseen. In 1996, the case broke open again. One suspect, John Irvine McInnes, was exhumed for DNA comparison, but the sample taken from Helen's clothing was degraded, and no definitive match could be made. The case slipped back into silence. Later, comparisons were drawn between Bible John and Peter Tobin, a convicted Scottish serial killer active in the same era. Tobin frequented the Barrowland. Tobin resembled the sketch. Tobin used fake names, including John. Tobin murdered women and concealed their bodies in ritualistic ways. But the evidence was circumstantial, and Tobin denied involvement until his death. Bible John remains a ghost, a man who danced among crowds, charmed women with religious verses, and killed with escalating brutality. Someone who brought scripture into conversation, only to commit acts that defied every moral code he claimed to uphold. To this day, the Barrowland Ballroom still stands. Bands play there, couples meet there, but locals remember, they whisper, and some say that if you stand near the entrance late at night, you can almost see the silhouette of a man with a polite smile, quoting scripture as he steps into the darkness. Bible, John walked away without a name, without an arrest, without a single confirmed identity, a killer hidden in a crowd of thousands. From the crowded dance floors of Glasgow, where a single man vanished into the press of bodies, we moved to a quieter American city in the early 1970s. Here, the victims were young girls, the pattern was chilling, the initials matched, and the killer used the alphabet as a roadmap. 1971, Rochester, New York. A small city where neighborhoods felt familiar, children played freely, outside, and most families believed danger only lived on television. But everything changed on a cold November afternoon when a 10-year-old girl walked toward a local pharmacy and never made it home. Her name was Carmen Colon. She was bright, energetic, and loved by her family. On November 16, she left her grandmother's house for a short errand. Witnesses later reported seeing a young girl on the shoulder of Interstate 490, running, waving her arms, crying for help. Drivers looked, drivers wondered, but no one stopped. No one understood that they were witnessing the final moments of a child trying to escape a predator. 2 days later, Carmen's body was found in a ditch near Churchville. She had been sexually assaulted, strangled, and brutally beaten. Her clothing was torn. Her small frame bore signs of a violent struggle. But there was one chilling detail that detectives could not ignore. Carmen Colon, found in Churchville. Both names began with C. Investigators did not yet see a pattern. They were overwhelmed with the horror of what had happened and the absence of clear suspects. But the killer was patient. He waited. He watched. And nearly 2 years later, he struck again. April 1973. 11-year-old Wanda Walkowicz left home to buy groceries for her family. Something she did often, something she felt safe doing. She carried a paper bag of food out of the store around 5:15 in the afternoon. She began her short walk home. She never arrived. Her body was found the next day beside an embankment in Webster. She had been redressed after death, carefully but clumsily. A detail that suggested control, ritual, or guilt. She had been assaulted, strangled, and handled with the same disturbing care shown in Carmen's case. Again, the initials matched. Wanda Walkowicz, Webster. It could no longer be ignored. A killer was stalking young girls. A killer who selected victims whose names matched the towns where he discarded their bodies. A killer who kept children alive long enough to terrorize them, then left them posed in rural areas where they would be discovered. Fear spread quickly through Rochester. Parents escorted their children everywhere. Schools increased security. Police patrols doubled. But the killer was quiet, controlled, invisible. And he was not done. November 1973. 10-year-old Michelle Mayenza was walking home from school when she was seen getting into a beige or tan car. Witnesses later described the driver as a thin white male in his late teens or 20s. Michelle was missing for 2 days. When her body was discovered in a ditch near Macedon, the pattern was complete. Michelle Mayenza, Macedon. The staging was similar, the assault identical, the cause of death the same, ligature strangulation. But this time, witnesses saw more. A man driving erratically with a crying girl in the passenger seat. A man asking for directions near a rural road. A man acting nervous. Still, despite leads, no arrest was made. For Rochester police, this became one of the largest manhunts in the city's history. More than 800 suspects were questioned. Search grids were mapped for patterns. Investigators studied the geography, looking for meaning behind the initials. Was the killer choosing victims because of their names? Was it coincidence? Or was he manipulating the dump sites to create a pattern that would taunt detectives? Behavioral profilers believed the killer was organized, methodical, and familiar with the region. Someone who blended into society easily. Someone who drove regularly between towns east of Rochester. Someone who may have been young, calm, and outwardly unthreatening. Several suspects emerged over the years. One was Kenneth Bianchi, who later became infamous as one of the hillside stranglers in California. Bianchi lived in Rochester at the time. He worked near some of the abduction sites. He matched several behavioral traits, but no physical evidence ever linked him to the Alphabet murders. Another suspect was a local firefighter with a history of inappropriate behavior. He was investigated extensively, questioned repeatedly, even confronted with witness accounts. But again, no forensic connection existed. Scores of men were analyzed. None were charged. Part of the difficulty was the era. In the early 1970s, forensic science had limits. DNA testing did not exist. Hair analysis was primitive. Witness statements were the backbone of investigations, and they were often vague or contradictory. Some saw a dark car, others light. Some said older man, others younger. The killer moved during periods when visibility was low and panic was high. Then the murders stopped. No fourth victim. No attempted abduction with matching traits, no letters, no confessions, just silence. The Alphabet Killer vanished as quickly as he had appeared. Years later, advances in DNA brought renewed hope. Evidence from the victim's clothing was retested, but deterioration from time and weather left the samples incomplete. No usable profile emerged. The killer remained buried in the uncertainty of history. To this day, the Alphabet Killer case haunts Rochester. 3 young girls, 3 matching initials, 3 murders that forever changed how the community saw itself. The alphabet was meant to teach children how to read and write. For this killer, it became a signature, a pattern, a dark imprint left on the innocent. The murders ended 50 years ago. The questions never did. From the suburban neighborhoods of Rochester, where a single predator used initials as a roadmap, we moved to the dry desert outskirts of Albuquerque. 2001, a single bone discovered on a mesa. A discovery that opened the largest serial burial site in New Mexico history, Albuquerque, New Mexico, a desolate stretch of desert known as the West Mesa. Scrubland, dust, sparse houses, and a silence so complete that screams disappear into the wind. Between 2001 and 2005, women vanished from Albuquerque's South Valley. Many were young, many struggled with addiction, many were part of the city's vulnerable sex work community. Their disappearances were often dismissed or overlooked. Some were labeled runaways, others were assumed lost to the streets. But starting in 2009, the desert revealed a truth that had been buried beneath the sand for years. A single bone, found by a woman walking her dog, a femur protruding from the dry earth. She called police, expecting it might be an animal bone. Instead, forensic teams uncovered something unimaginable. Over days, then weeks, the sand gave up skulls, ribs, pelvises, clothing fragments, jewelry, all arranged across the barren mesa like a twisted graveyard. When the excavation finally ended, 11 women and 1 unborn child had been found, all buried in shallow graves, all victims of the same unknown predator. He would be known as the West Mesa Bone Collector. Investigators began piecing together the chronology. Most of the victims had vanished between 2001 and 2005. They were primarily Hispanic women in their teens, 20s, and early 30s. Many battled addiction, some were involved in prostitution, all were vulnerable, alone, and easily targeted. The killer seemed to understand this. He did not choose at random. He selected women who the city barely noticed had gone missing. The burial site itself was carefully chosen. The West Mesa was undeveloped land at the time, with no homes, no fences, and no reason for anyone to wander there. The killer likely visited at night, driving up dirt tracks, carrying bodies one at a time, digging shallow pits with speed and confidence. But something unexpected happened after 2005. The killings stopped. The killer did not have a sudden change of heart. The land did. In the mid-2000s, Albuquerque experienced rapid growth. Housing developments pushed outward into what had once been untouched desert. Construction crews began leveling areas near the mesa, bringing heavy machinery, surveyors, and residents into places no one had entered in decades. The killer's burial ground was no longer safe. He stopped because he could no longer hide. It is one of the rare cases where urban expansion may have unintentionally saved countless lives. Detectives began reconstructing the victims' lives. Many had been reported missing over the years, but the cases never connected. Families believed their daughters were still out there somewhere, lost, struggling, trying to survive. The West Mesa changed everything. It gave families answers, but no justice. One woman, known only as Veronica, survived a near attack during the same period. She told police a man had tried to pick her up in a dark-colored truck, demanding she get inside. She escaped. Years later, a memory resurfaced. She used to see that same man frequently, near Central Avenue, watching, waiting. But she never learned his name. The investigation produced several persons of interest, but no arrests. One man, Lorenzo Montoya, lived only a few miles from the burial site. He had a violent history involving sex workers and teenage girls. In 2006, he was shot and killed by the boyfriend of a woman he had attempted to strangle inside his driveway. After his death, murders along the suspected timeline appeared to stop. Circumstantial, suspicious, but not conclusive. Another figure, an amateur photographer, became a person of interest after photos of women resembling the victims surfaced online. He left the country and never returned. No charges were filed. Then there were rumors of traffickers, pimps, drug dealers, predators operating within the underground economy of Albuquerque's sex work scene. Some victims had connections to the same social circles, but again, nothing concrete tied any one man to the burial site. Police collected thousands of leads, excavated bones, interviewed families, analyzed satellite images from 2004 that showed strange disturbances in the exact location where bodies were later found. Still, the identity of the killer remained a void. What made the case so haunting was not just the scale, it was the invisibility. These women disappeared quietly. Their killer operated in the margins. Their bodies were hidden beneath a thin layer of soil, and the city did not know 11 of its daughters had been murdered until years later. The West Mesa bone collector understood the land. He understood the victims. He understood how to vanish. To this day, the site has become a memorial. Families leave flowers, crosses, photographs. A reminder that these women mattered, even if the world ignored them in life. The killer, meanwhile, walks through history nameless, perhaps dead, perhaps imprisoned on unrelated charges, perhaps living quietly in the same city, older, unnoticed, hiding behind a past buried in desert sand. Time erodes evidence. Wind erodes footprints. The desert keeps its secrets well, and so far, it has kept the identity of this killer completely hidden. From the modern desert of New Mexico, we travel backward more than a century to another American city, this time darkened by gas lamps, dirt roads, and a rising fear of something new. 1992, spring in the American Midwest. A season of warm winds and long highways stretching across open land. Interstate 70 cuts straight through Missouri, Kansas, Indiana, and Ohio, a vein running through the heart of America. And beginning in April of that year, someone used that highway as a hunting route. He became known as the I-70 Killer, a traveling executioner who murdered store clerks along the interstate. No robberies, no witnesses, no hesitation. Just a single gunshot, always to the back of the head, and a killer who walked out as calmly as he walked in. This is one of the most chilling, unsolved serial cases in modern American history. It begins on April 8, 1992. Indianapolis, Indiana, a quiet Payless shoe source store. Inside, 26-year-old Robin Fuldauer worked alone. Sometime between early afternoon and 6 p.m., a man entered the shop. There was no forced entry, no argument, no theft. He simply approached Robin, aimed a .22 caliber pistol, and fired a single shot behind her ear. The precision indicated experience, someone who had done this before or had trained to. Employees from nearby stores found her minutes later. The killer had already vanished onto I-70 heading west. 3 days later, April 11, the killer struck again. This time in St. Charles, Missouri. He entered a bridal shop on a slow Saturday afternoon, where Patricia Magers, aged 32, and Patricia Smith, aged 51, were working. Customers walked past the storefront, but inside, the killer locked the door and shot both women execution style. He attempted to shoot a third woman, a customer, but the gun misfired. She escaped by playing dead. She survived, becoming the only living witness who came face to face with him. Her description painted a haunting picture. A white male in his 20s or 30s, slim, 5'7" to 5'9", clean-shaven, with a calm demeanor, disturbingly calm. He spoke little. He moved with confidence. He didn't panic when the gun jammed. Instead, he tried again, then fled back toward the interstate. The killings continued. April 27, 1992, Terre Haute, Indiana, 32-year-old Michael McCown, owner of a ceramic store, was shot in the back of the head. The killer likely didn't know Michael was a man. He wore his hair long, tied back, and from behind could have been mistaken for a woman. This detail marks a crucial pattern. The killer appeared to target small stores with lone female clerks. Michael was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. 3 murders, 1 attempted, all along Interstate 70. All small businesses, all execution-style shots to the back of the head, all occurring between mid-afternoon and early evening. Then the pattern went silent for a month. But the killer wasn't done. May 3rd, 1992, Wichita, Kansas. At a recently opened convenience store, store clerk Sarah Blessing, age 37, was murdered in the same manner. A nearby grocery store worker saw a man walking quickly to a small red car, possibly a Ford or Pontiac. This became one of the few vehicle clues ever linked to the suspect. And then, the murders stopped. 5 victims, 1 survivor. All killed within 4 weeks. All stored along a neat geographic line hugging Interstate 70. the FBI built one of the most detailed serial killer profiles of its era. They believed the killer was a white male, 25 to 35 at the time, either military trained or highly familiar with firearms, comfortable traveling long distances, emotionally detached, disciplined, possibly a mission-oriented killer. He struck only when conditions were perfect. He entered stores quietly. He left without being noticed. No fingerprints, no DNA, no motive outside the act of killing itself. Detectives across 5 states compared notes, but the killer's path was too clean. He avoided cameras in an era before digital surveillance was common. He left no shell casings because he used a semi-automatic weapon with a manual shell extraction system, an unusual choice that further masked evidence. In 1994, 2 years after the murders, a crime in Texas caught investigators' attention. A man named Donald R. Miller murdered a young female clerk in a similar execution style, but DNA and ballistic evidence later excluded him. He was not the I-70 killer. For decades, the case went cold. Then, in 2001, another possible lead surfaced: Herb Baumeister, a suspected serial killer in Indiana who died by suicide in 1996. But Baumeister's known victims were teenage boys, and ballistics ruled him out. The strongest lead surfaced in 2021, when Missouri police named Thomas "Tommy" Lynn Sells, a prolific serial killer, as a potential suspect. But Sells was executed in 2014, and the timeline of his travels did not convincingly align. The truth remained the same. The I-70 killer walked into small businesses, murdered women without hesitation, and spent less than a minute inside. He moved quickly, efficiently, and cleanly, and he disappeared. 30-plus years later, some investigators believe he is dead. Others believe he may have been arrested on unrelated crimes, and some believe he simply stopped, either because he knew he was being hunted or because his life circumstances changed. Whatever the reason, the man who stalked Interstate 70 left a trail of death without leaving a name: 5 women, 1 man, 1 survivor, a 4-week spree that still haunts 5 states, and a killer who remains a shadow on the highway. 1993. That is the year the first victim, identified years later, was believed to have been murdered in the remote marshes and barrier islands of Long Island, New York. A stretch of coastline where the sound of waves meets the rustle of leaves. A place where darkness can hide bodies and secrets. On November 19, 1993, 28-year-old Sandra Costilla, a sex worker from Trinidad and Tobago who advertised online under an alias, disappeared from New York City and was later found deceased in a wooded area near North Sea, Suffolk County. Her remains were found by hunters, and investigators did not initially connect her death to a serial predator. The case might have remained an isolated homicide if not for what happened in May 2010. 23-year-old Shannon Gilbert vanished after calling 911 from Oak Beach on Long Island. Her disappearance triggered a wide-scale search. Then, weeks later, in December 2010, detectives found 4 bodies, 3 women and 1 additional set of remains, buried near the Ocean Parkway Service Road at Gilgo Beach. The bodies were not left randomly. All were young women who had worked as escorts. Many had advertised on Craigslist. Many had met clients, accepted rides, and then they disappeared. Some bodies were wrapped in burlap, disposed of on foam insulation, hidden beneath foliage, beveled into plastic bags. The location, the narrow strip of land between the Atlantic Ocean and the bay, offered concealment, access via service roads, and isolation. Investigators soon believed they were facing one of the most chilling unresolved serial killer cases in modern U.S. history. At least 11 victims have been officially linked to the Long Island serial killer investigation, with many more suspected. The horrifying pattern: young women, often in their 20s, working in the sex industry or escort services. Last seen after leaving New York City or nearby. Bodies disposed of along Long Island's South Shore barrier islands and service roads. Some wrapped in burlap, some partially dismembered, some simply left exposed. A lack of motive, or at least a motive that remained hidden. No arrest for years. One of the most powerful leads arrived in July 2023, when 19-year-old Manhattan architect Rex Heuermann was arrested and charged with multiple murders in the case. He remains in custody awaiting trial. And yet, many investigators caution that the case may involve more than one killer. The terrain, victimology, and time span suggest possibly multiple perpetrators. The timeline spans decades. Some remains have been dated to the mid-1990s. Others were found in 2010 and 2011. Investigators discovered some of the victims had traveled from Manhattan to Long Island. Some had last been seen leaving Manhattan early in the morning, walking alone to clients, getting into cars, and never returning. The motive remains elusive. Some detective theories suggest a hunting ground in which the killer, or killers, exploited the vulnerability of sex workers, expecting fewer witnesses, less policing, and easy disposal sites. Others point to the killer's use of service roads and marshland, areas rarely patrolled, far from civilian traffic. The public's attention came only after the accumulation of bodies and the persistence of families refusing to accept missing reports. Many of the victims were initially listed as runaways or victims of overdoses. The discovery of bodies in Gilgo Beach, a place designed to be hidden, forced the authorities to reconsider. One of the victims' families, for example, insisted their daughter would never have run away and pressed for more investigation. Others refused to believe she was just another missing prostitute. Their persistence uncovered patterns. The result? A map of horror across New York's Long Island. Evidence recovered at the disposal sites included hair fragments, plastic ties, foam insulation, burned clothing, and items linking to the victims. Wallets, ID cards missing, cell phones abandoned. Some items pointed to the killer's use of mopeds to move bodies. Others hinted at familiarity with Long Island's geography. Yet no definitive vehicle, fingerprint, or DNA profile tied the entire set of victims to the same person, at least not publicly acknowledged. The arrest of Rex Hoyerman renewed hope. Prosecutors say they matched hair found on one victim's body to Hoyerman's daughter's hair. They obtained his discarded pizza crust DNA. They found planning documents. But even as one man sits in custody, the case remains unresolved. Many victims still unidentified, many leads still open, many families still waiting. The Long Island serial killer case is not merely about the murders, it's about the failure of systems. Policing that assumed sex worker disappearances were routine, jurisdictions that failed to combine data, an investigation that only ignited when the bodies were discovered, communities who waited decades for acknowledgement. To date, no conviction has been finalized for all the victims associated with the case. Some charges are pending, some remains may never be identified, and the killer or killers still walk free, though perhaps aging, perhaps silent, perhaps moving to a new method or quietly inactive. The story ends for this chapter not with justice, but with demand. Demand by families, by activists, by survivors. We will not forget. We will keep pressing. We will force the system to face what it ignored. The victims deserve more than anonymity. They deserve names. They deserve closure. From the quiet marshes and deserted service roads of Long Island, we now travel to a city of sunshine, jazz, and nightclubs, where a killer terrorized black gay men in the 1970s. Black Doodler, 1974, San Francisco, California. The next case is the one of the Black Doodler, a city defined by freedom, nightlife, music, and a thriving LGBTQ+ community that had grown despite decades of discrimination. Castro bars glowed under neon lights. Late-night diners stayed open until dawn, and among the crowds moved a young man who carried a sketchbook. He drew strangers. He charmed them with portraits. He laughed. He flirted. And then he killed them. He became known only as the Black Doodler, a name that captured the simplicity of his facade and the horror of what he left behind. The nightmare began on January 27, 1974, when a man walking his dog near San Francisco's Ocean Beach discovered a fully dressed body lying face down in the sand. The victim was 34-year-old Gerald Kavanaugh, a Canadian immigrant. He had been stabbed multiple times in the chest and back. His body showed signs of a violent struggle. There was no robbery, no clear motive, no witnesses. And there was something else. Defensive wounds suggested he had trusted the man who attacked him, trusted him enough to let him get close. By April, another body appeared, this time in the Spreckles Lake area of Golden Gate Park. The victim, 31-year-old Joseph Stevens, a well-known drag performer and comedian, had been stabbed repeatedly, his last known sighting, leaving a bar late at night with an unidentified man. Detectives now had two victims, both gay men, both killed brutally, both discovered in areas where someone could retreat into darkness quickly. The city whispered but remained unaware of the storm that was forming. Then, on June 25th, another man was found. Klaus Christmann, a German-American immigrant, father, and chef, discovered near Land's End. His murder was more frenzied. Dozens of stab wounds, slashes across his neck. The brutality suggested rage. The positioning of his body suggested staging. Police now saw a pattern. The victims were all gay men, all last seen near gay bars or clubs, all murdered late at night, all stabbed repeatedly. This was a serial killer, but the killer's signature finally emerged when a survivor came forward. According to multiple accounts, the killer was a young black male, slender, soft-spoken, artistic. He would sit alone in bars, drawing caricatures or quick portraits of patrons. He approached men politely, showing them their sketch, sparking conversation. When the moment felt right, he convinced them to leave with him. For many victims, that was the last time they were seen alive. Detectives soon located two survivors who encountered the Doodler and lived. Their stories aligned almost perfectly. They met a young black artist at a bar. He sketched them. They talked about art, about California, about identity. Then suddenly, he attacked, stabbing fast, silently, expressionless. One survivor fought him off. The other fled bleeding into the early morning streets. Both reported the killer to police. Both identified him. Both knew his real name, but neither would testify. In 1974, being publicly identified as gay could cost a man his job, his family, his life. Fear of discrimination silenced witnesses. Silence protected the killer. The police had a suspect. They could not arrest him. The killings continued. Another victim, Warren Andrews, was discovered in April 1975, brutally beaten near the golf course at Land's End. He survived the attack, but never regained consciousness. He died weeks later. The pattern of violence matched the Doodler's profile, though the wounds were different enough that some detectives debated the connection. Altogether, detectives believed the Doodler was responsible for at least 6 murders, and possibly 12. But with no cooperating witnesses and no clear forensic evidence, the case stalled. And then, like so many serial killers who feel pressure or get what they came for, the Doodler vanished. No new bodies, no new sketches, no new sightings, just silence. For decades, the case remained a cold legend in San Francisco's history. A killer who had been named privately, identified by multiple men, interviewed by detectives, and yet never charged because the victims he targeted were too afraid to be seen by the world. Then, in 2018, the San Francisco Police Department reopened the case with renewed urgency. DNA technology had advanced. Old evidence was re-examined. A small amount of biological material from one of the scenes yielded a partial profile. Not enough to confirm an identity, but enough to eliminate suspects. The police re-released the original composite sketch, an image of a young black man with soft features and large eyes. They announced a reward. They released an age-progressed version of the sketch, aging him forward 40 years. They also revealed that their main suspect was still alive. But even with public pressure, the case remains unsolved. The witnesses who once refused to testify are now elderly. Views have changed, but time has taken its toll. The killer, if still alive, would be in his 70s today, perhaps living quietly, perhaps reflecting, perhaps long past the man he once was in the bars of San Francisco. The tragedy of the Black Doodler case is not just the murders, it is the silence that allowed them to happen. A community that feared speaking, a society that punished victims for who they loved, a killer protected by prejudice. 6 men died, others survived, and the Doodler walked away without a single day in court. It remains one of San Francisco's darkest open wounds. From the bars and coastlines of 1970s San Francisco, we move to a killer who wrote letters, sent ciphers, and taunted the world. 1968, Northern California. The next case is the Zodiac Killer, Northern California. The end of the 60s meant counterculture, peace movements, and quiet nights along the back roads that stretch between Vallejo, Napa, and San Francisco. But on the night of December 20th, a fear began that would grip the West Coast for decades. A young couple, 17-year-old Betty Lou Jensen and 16-year-old David Faraday, parked their Rambler on Lake Herman Road, a secluded lover's lane. At some point between 10:40 and 11:15 p.m., a man approached their car. He ordered them out. David was shot in the head at close range. Betty Lou ran. She was shot 5 times in the back as she fled. The scene was clean. No shell casings touched, no fingerprints, no motive. It was later described as an execution. 7 months passed before the killer struck again. July 4th, 1969. Blue Rock Springs Park, Vallejo. 22-year-old Darlene Farron and 19-year-old Michael Mageau sat in a parked car when another vehicle pulled up beside them. A man stepped out, walked toward their window, and opened fire with a 9mm handgun. Darlene was killed. Michael survived, barely. An hour later, the Vallejo Police Department received a phone call from a man calmly confessing to both the current attack and the Lake Herman Road murders. His voice was steady, controlled. He gave directions to the crime scene, and then he hung up. The terror escalated when the killer contacted the press. At the end of July, 3 newspapers, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald, received nearly identical handwritten letters. Each demanded publication on the front page. Each letter threatened more killings if ignored. And each letter included a cipher, over 400 characters long, claiming to reveal the killer's identity. The letters were signed, "This is the Zodiac speaking." It was the first appearance of the name that would become infamous. Within a week, a teacher and his wife cracked the cipher. It did not contain a name. Instead, it revealed a chilling message. The killer enjoyed murdering because it was so much fun, and he believed he was collecting slaves for the afterlife. The taunts continued. On September 27, 1969, at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, 22-year-old Cecilia Shepard and 20-year-old Brian Hartnell were relaxing by the water when a man approached wearing a black executioner-style hood with a cross-circle symbol on his chest. He tied them up, then stabbed them repeatedly with a long knife. Brian survived. Cecilia died 2 days later. Before leaving, the killer wrote on Brian's car door, listing the dates of his previous murders, signing with his symbol. 2 weeks later came the most brazen attack of all. October 11th, 1969, San Francisco, Presidio Heights. 29-year-old cab driver Paul Stein was shot in the head by a passenger he picked up near Union Square. The killer calmly wiped the cab down, tore off a piece of Paul's shirt, and walked away into the night while multiple witnesses watched from nearby homes. A search was launched immediately. Police stopped a white male walking in the area, but let him go after dispatch mistakenly described the suspect as black. That mistake may have allowed the killer to walk right past officers. Days later, the San Francisco Chronicle received another letter containing a blood-stained piece of Paul Stein's shirt. Proof the Zodiac was telling the truth. The case exploded into national obsession. Over the next 2 years, the Zodiac sent dozens of letters. Some contained ciphers, some mocked police failures, some threatened to bomb school buses, some included diagrams, symbols, or bizarre claims about future attacks. No suspect was ever confirmed. Authorities investigated hundreds of men. Some appeared promising. One in particular became a near obsession for investigators. Arthur Lee Allen, a former school teacher. He owned a Zodiac brand watch with the same symbol used in the letters. He made disturbing comments about liking the idea of hunting people. He lived near the attack locations. He matched several witness descriptions, but handwriting experts disagreed, and no physical evidence linked him definitively to the crimes. Allen died in 1992. Many still believe he was the Zodiac. Others are certain he was not. For decades, the case sat cold. Letters were re-examined. DNA from stamps and envelopes produced partial profiles, but never a match. Ciphers remained unsolved until recently. In 2020, an international team of codebreakers cracked the Zodiac's infamous 340 cipher. It revealed a disturbing message boasting that he was not afraid of death, but again, no name. The Zodiac's identity remained hidden. Despite his claims of dozens of victims, only 5 confirmed attacks have been linked to him, resulting in 7 victims. 2 survivors. The Zodiac may have died decades ago, or he may have lived a quiet life, fading into obscurity, or he could still be alive today. An elderly man somewhere in California, knowing he pulled off one of the most notorious crimes in American history without ever being caught. The Zodiac Killer did not just commit murder. He weaponized fear, he manipulated the media, he taunted the police, and he created a legacy of terror that shaped modern profiling and investigative techniques. His ciphers still generate debate, his letters still inspire analysis, his identity still fuels speculation. More than 50 years later, the same question remains. Who was the Zodiac? Whoever he was, he walked away untouched. From the hills and cities of California, where a killer wrote letters and demanded to be seen, we move across the ocean, back in time, to the shadows of Victorian London. 1888, London, fog, gas lamps, narrow alleys, and the most infamous unidentified serial killer in history. 1888, London, England. A city at the height of the Victorian age, industrial smoke, cobblestone streets, horse-drawn carriages, poverty colliding with privilege. In the East End, amid cramped lodging houses and gaslit alleys, life was harsh, nights were unsafe. The poor survived one day at a time, and it was here, in the neighborhood of Whitechapel, that the most infamous unidentified killer in history stepped out of the fog. He would become known as Jack the Ripper. The terror opened on August 31st, 1888, when the body of Mary Ann Nichols, aged 43, was discovered in Bucks Row. Her throat had been slashed twice, nearly to the spine. Her abdomen was mutilated. Police assumed it was the work of a violent drunk or a jealous lover. But they were wrong. A week later, on September 8th, the killer struck again. Annie Chapman, aged 47, was found behind a house on Hanbury Street. Her throat was cut. Her abdomen was opened. Organs were missing. The precision suggested skill, possibly anatomical knowledge, possibly a butcher, a surgeon, or a man comfortable with knives. Panic began to spread. Prostitutes who worked the streets at night whispered about a man in the shadows, a man who carried a small medical bag, a man who seemed refined but dangerous. But London was crowded, faces blurred, descriptions contradicted each other. Then came the night that defined the legend. September the 30th, 1888, the double event. At 1 a.m., Elizabeth Stride, age 44, was found in Dutfield's yard with her throat slashed. Unlike the others, there were no abdominal mutilations. Some believed the killer had been interrupted. 45 minutes later, just blocks away in Mitre Square, the body of Catherine Eddowes, age 46, was found. Her throat was cut, her abdomen was opened, facial features were slashed. A kidney had been removed with speed and expertise. 4 women in 4 weeks, a signature too consistent to ignore. Now, the city was gripped with terror. Newspapers printed sensational headlines. Crowds gathered at crime scenes. Police flooded Whitechapel. The killer watched the chaos he created. And then, letters began arriving. One, written in red ink, was addressed to the Central News Agency and began with the now famous greeting, "Dear Boss," signed, Jack the Ripper. Whether the killer actually wrote it remains debated, but the name stuck. It spread across London like wildfire. Another letter followed, from hell. This one came with half of a human kidney. It claimed the other half belonged to a murdered woman. Doctors could not confirm it, but the message intensified the fear. The final canonical victim appeared 6 weeks after Eddowes, November 9th, 1888. Mary Jane Kelly, age 25, was found inside her lodging room on Miller's Court. Her body was mutilated beyond recognition. Flesh removed. Organs arranged around the bed. The brutality was unprecedented and likely took much longer than the killer could risk outside. It was his last known murder. After Mary Jane Kelly, the killing stopped. The killer vanished. What remained was a city traumatized and a case that would haunt history. Police investigated hundreds of suspects. Writers and detectives proposed theories for over a century. Suspects included doctors, butchers, barbers, sailors, aristocrats, even members of the royal family. But no one was ever arrested. No one ever confessed. No forensic evidence existed. The truth was drowned in the noise of rumors, fear, and sensational journalism. Among the most compelling suspects was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish barber living near the murder sites. He suffered from severe mental illness, had violent episodes, and was institutionalized after the murders stopped. A shawl allegedly linked to him through modern DNA analysis has been widely disputed, leaving no definitive answer. Another suspect, Montague John Druitt, a barrister and teacher, died by suicide shortly after the final murder. Some investigators at the time privately suspected him, believing his death explained why the killings stopped, but evidence was circumstantial at best. Thomas Cutbush, a medical student with violent tendencies, was also considered, but police publicly dismissed him in 1894. The list is endless. None conclusively proven. The tragedy of the Ripper killings is not merely the brutality, it is the context. Whitechapel was a place where poverty was so overwhelming that victims blended into the city's forgotten masses. Women walked the streets because they had no other means to survive. They were exploited by society long before they were murdered, and the killer exploited that. He hunted where police presence was weak. He targeted women society had marginalized. He slipped through narrow alleys and melting fog, using the environment as his shield. Jack the Ripper did not just kill. He changed the world's understanding of murder. He influenced crime reporting. He inspired profiles of serial predators. He forced cities to rethink policing. And he entered popular culture in a way no other unidentified killer ever has. But beneath the legend are 5 real women whose lives matter far more than the man who took them. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. Women who lived hard lives, suffered harsh realities, and deserved far more from the world than to be remembered only as victims. Jack the Ripper became myth, but he was real. A man who walked London streets, killed repeatedly, mutilated brutally, and then disappeared into history. 135 years later, he remains unidentified, the most famous ghost in the history of crime. In the end, these stories remind us of something we often try to forget. Evil does not always wear a mask. Sometimes it walks beside us. Sometimes it lives unnoticed in the shadows of our cities. And sometimes it slips through history without ever being named. We have traveled from the fog of Victorian London to the deserts of New Mexico, from crowded dance halls and lonely highways to places where justice never came. These killers left behind victims, families, and questions that still echo across decades. But their stories matter, because remembering them means refusing to let silence win. If you found this journey through the darkest corners of history compelling, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep uncovering the truth, telling these stories with respect, and bringing light into the places where the world once turned away. And before you go, I want to know, where in the world are you watching from tonight? Tell me in the comments. I read every one of them. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and keep the lights on.